Hey everybody, do you have an XR series mixer and have you been struggling with how to get your effects to go to your aux outputs so you can hear some in your monitor mix? Or on the flip side, have you ever had an effect in your monitor mix and A, you're not sure how it got there, and B, you're not sure how to get rid of it? Well, I'm going to cover all those topics right now. Let's go! Before we dive into the heart of everything, I want to point out that this is kind of a long video, longer than normal for this channel, but that's because there's a lot to cover. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do most of the explaining about how the functions of the mixer work on the desktop software. I will break things down for both iOS and for Android, but it'll really help you to understand if you follow all the way through. If you do have a good grasp on most of this stuff, you can jump ahead if you want to, but watching the video in its entirety will really give you a better base understanding of how things work on the console before you apply it to either your iPad or your Android tablet. For this demonstration, I have a microphone attached to input channel 1, and I have a speaker that'll move between my AUX1 output and my main left output as required. And the first thing we need to do is get signal from an input to our effect and bring that back on an effect return. I'm going to assume you already know how to get signal to your aux outputs to use for your monitor mixes. If you don't, please check out my video on how to set up and use AUXES. On the desktop version of the software, there are a few different ways you can send level to your effect unit. The first way is by selecting your effect button or your effect bus on the right side of the console. Once you've done that, you can raise the fader for any of your instrument channels to send level from that channel to the effect unit. In my case, I'm going to send level from my microphone on channel 1 to effect 1. So I'm simply going to raise the fader, and now I have sent signal to that bus. You can see here, there are 4 boxes representing our 4 effect units. And because I've added signal to the first one, we can see a blue line. The second way you can send signal to that same effect unit is by selecting the instrument channel you want to send signal from, clicking on the channel tab at the top, and then under effect sends, if you hover over the corresponding effect send you want to use, you'll see a fader pop up. Dragging that fader is exactly the same as the way we just sent it. The third way you can send signal to the effect unit on the desktop software is by, again, selecting your instrument channel that you want to send from and then choosing the Sends tab. Under the Sends tab, you'll see effects 1 through 4 listed and each has a fader. Raising the fader on the corresponding effect sends signal to this effect unit the same way we just did in the other 2 examples. Once we have signal going to our effect, it has to come back to the console in order to be added to your mix. In the XR series mixers, we have 4 dedicated effect return channels, labeled, you guessed it, effects 1 through 4. Raising these faders automatically adds your affected signal to your front of house mix. For example, we've added signal to effect 1. And now if I raise the effect 1 return channel, it will automatically send affected signal to my mix on the main front of house bus. If I want to add signal to my monitor mix, then instead of the main left right bus, I need to choose the bus that corresponds to my mix. In this case, bus 1. If I select bus 1, I now have the same 3 options for sending signal as I did when I was initially sending them to the effect unit. The first way is sends on fader, like this. The second way is selecting the effects channel itself, and then under the channel tab, we can use a fader on the aux bus send to send signal to our first bus. Or of course, choosing the sends fader at the top, we can go to bus 1 and use the fader below that to send signal as well. Once you have signal going to your effect, coming back to the console, and then being sent to your bus, you need to do a couple things to make sure that signal's getting there. Number 1 is unmute your source channel or your instrument channel. Number 2 is unmute your effect channel. And number 3 is select the bus and then make sure that the bus master is unmuted. If all 3 of those things are done, you should have signal going to your monitor mix. Something to note. Because the effect return fader automatically assigns affected signal to the main left-right bus by default. You have some options if you want to control level independently for the effect on your main left-right front of house bus as well as your monitor bus. In our first example, let's assume that you're going to dedicate one of your effect units to only sending effects to your vocal monitor. Maybe you just really like to have reverb on your voice in your monitor for you to hear, but you don't want that signal going to front of house. The quick way to fix this is to select your effects fader, in this case for me, effects 1, and then you can choose either the main tab or the channel tab. Both of these tabs have a button that corresponds to assigning signal to your main outputs. It's called LR main stereo. If you deselect either of those buttons, you have now removed the effect return channel from your main front of house mix. Any adjustments you make to this effects fader will now only be reflected in your monitor. The other option you have is again to select your effects 1 return fader, and then this time select the sends tab at the top. Above your bus 1, you'll see a bunch of selections that tell you where to take the signal from before it goes to the effect unit. By default, it should be set to post fader, but if you set it to pre-fader, you can hear that regardless of the position of my effect return fader, I'm getting signal through my monitor mix. Now keep in mind, when you do it this way, your fader has no effect on the amount of signal going to your monitor mix. The only way to change that level is to select your microphone channel and change the amount of signal you are sending to the effect unit, or to select the effect channel and change the amount of effect you are sending to the bus. Either will have the same effect. Here's a quick warning for you if you're making pre-post changes on the desktop software. With my microphone 1 selected and the sends tab selected, I can see the pre and post for all my bus sends and my effect sends. You'll notice this button to the right, that is a picture of a globe. If that globe is blue and highlighted, any pre-post change you make affects all channels. So if you only want to change pre-post for this one channel, you need to make sure that you have deselected the globe. Then you're making a change only to the channel you want. Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to demonstrate all the things we just talked about, but I'm going to do it with the speaker on so you can hear what's actually happening. The first thing I'm going to do is swap my speaker from the aux output, my monitor mix, over to the main left-right front of house. So with that swapped over, I'm going to start feeding signal into the system so you can hear me. So I'm going to start bringing up my microphone 1. Check, 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 1, 2, check, 1, 2. And you can hear me through the speaker. I'm going to turn this a little bit for better rejection. Check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2. Now the next thing we need to do is get some reverb going. Now we're not currently sending anything to the reverb. If you look, we've got nothing going on the sends and we're not seeing anything coming back on the return. So we're going to select our effects 1 button and I'm going to start dialing up level. And you can see we're sending a fair bit of level into it. It could be more, but we'll start there. So the next thing I need to do is come back to my main left-right because you can see there's signal going to effect and we can see it on the meters here for the return channel. So if I start bringing this up, you're going to hear me with reverb. Check, 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 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2. So there you go. We've got reverb. And we're hearing it in front of house. And just for you to know that we are indeed on the front of house mix, I'm going to mute the main left-right master. Check, check, check. There you go. It's gone. So you know we're actually working from the left-right main output. And now it's back. So remember, we talked about not having the effect go to the front of house in one particular scenario, that you only wanted signal to be going to the vocalist. So let's turn this back up, and then we're going to select effect, and we're going to go to our main tab and turn off the effect in the main left right. So you can see nothing has changed with signal going to the effect and coming back, but we've turned off the main left right, so that effect is no longer going out to the main front of house. And of course, the next thing I want to show you is getting the signal from our microphone and our effect unit into the vocal mix on bus 1. So I'm going to swap my speaker back from the main left and put it on aux 1 output. So I've made that change, and you'll notice you're not hearing me even though I've got faders up on the console, and that's because we haven't sent anything to our vocal bus yet. So I'm going to pull these faders down for now, and what I'm going to do is select my bus 1. Oh, actually before I do that, I'm going to turn the main left right back on for the effects unit. So then I'm going to click on bus 1, and I'm going to start bringing up my microphone, and look, you're hearing me amplified already. Why is that? Well, because this is a monitor mix, and as we discussed before, monitor mixes go pre-fader. So if I select the channel, you can see on the sends that it is indeed going to bus 1 pre-fader. So it doesn't matter what I do with this mix fader is only for the front of house mix, and if I raise it, you can see that it is going out on left right. If I pull it down, you can see that it is not, but we are still hearing it and seeing it on bus 1. The next thing to do is to get reverb going. Now, right now, we are sending signal to reverb, but it's not showing up on the effects 1. Why is that? Well, because we're sending to that post fader, which you can see here. So that means the effect fader has to be up for that signal, or sorry, this fader needs to be up for the signal to come through. If you wanted to change that, it's a very simple change. It's right here. Change it to pre-fader. And then you've got the same thing happening with the effect unit that you do with the bus. It's going regardless of main fader position. And then you can use this fader, or you can use this fader to change the amount of level going to the effect. But now let's get it coming into the bus so that we can hear it. So let's select bus 1, and then we're going to bring the effect return fader up. As you can see, we're seeing signal, and that's because we are indeed pre-fader to the effect as well. So let's select bus 1 and let's bring this up. Check, 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 1, 2, check, 1, 2, and we're not hearing the reverb. Why is that? Well, that's because the reverb is going to the bus post fader. So if I select this, you can see that there is signal going. There is signal going, but it is set to post fader. So I would have to do this, check 1, 2, check 1, 2, check, check, and now we've got reverb. And of course, because I turned the left right back on, that reverb would also be going to front of house. Again, turn it off if you don't want it to go there. But if I bring this fader up now, check, 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 even though the send is still post fader to the vocal mix, raising this fader only has an effect on the vocal mix and not on the main left right. So if I bring this up again, check, 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 you can see we're getting signal in the speaker, and we're seeing signal on the bus, but there's nothing happening on main left right because this is turned off in left right and this is post fader. So now let's quickly talk about those moments when you find you have your effect in your monitor mix, but you don't want it there and you don't know where to look specifically to get rid of it or to find out why it's happening. So what you would want to do in a case of that is choose the bus that represents the monitor mix that you're using. So bus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And then of course make sure that none of your effect faders are turned up. If they are, that means you're sending the return of those effect units to your monitor mix. And if you found that to be the case, you pull your faders down and you shouldn't have it in your monitor mix anymore. But James, I hear you saying, we clicked on our bus and the sends on fader all have the return channels turned down, and I'm still hearing it in my monitor. What's the deal? In a case like that, select your effect return faders and have a look on the sends page. Are any of your effects set to send to your buses pre-fader? If they are, That's probably why you're still hearing it. Changing it to post fader will stop that from happening. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you about is how to do these same things on iOS and Android. But before we do that, I want to point out something that could put you in a very sticky situation if you're not careful. I'm going to use the PC software to show you, but the same goes for both iOS and Android. Anyway, let's have a look here. As you know, when we click on a bus or when we click on an effect button, it turns our faders into send on fader. So here's something really key to note. If you have your effect button selected and you actually dial the effect return into that effect, you are now sending a loop of that effect back into itself. It will build and it will feed back and it will be crazy. So if you are experiencing a situation where one of your effect units is giving you crazy feedback and you just don't know why, this is where to check. Select your effect buttons and make sure that you do not have the effect dialed back into itself. It's very easy to make this mistake, especially if you're new to sends on faders. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is show you how to send signal to your effect unit and how to send the return of the effect into your monitor bus, but on an iPad. Everything is pretty much the same. There's just some layout differences. If you've jumped ahead to this point in the chapters and you don't understand what I'm talking about from this point on, it's probably worth jumping back in the video and watching how I talk about things with the PC and Mac desktop software, because it'll relate directly to what's happening here. Okay, on your iPad, the quick way to send signal to your effect unit is to choose the effect button that corresponds on the right-hand side. So for me, effect 1. Now my mix faders are all sends on fader, just like on the desktop software. So if I start raising microphone 1, you can see that I'm actually sending it to the effect unit. Same goes for sending it to your vocal mix on your monitor. Choosing the bus and then raising the main fader sends signal to that bus. The other way to do this on your iPad is to select the channel and then choosing the Sends tab. Again, this is the same thing we can do on the desktop software. So now I've got bus sends and effect sends visible. I can choose to send signal to my monitor mix. I can choose to send signal to my effects. This is also where we can change pre and post fader. For example, right now, mic 1 is being sent pre. You can see pre listed beneath this first bus send fader. If I select that fader and then I choose post, you'll see that it has changed to post underneath the fader. Same thing goes for your effects. If you choose the effect send and then choose your pre or post, you'll see it change the name underneath the fader. If you're not seeing these choices in pre-EQ, post-EQ, pre and post, it's because you haven't clicked on the Advanced tab. The Advanced tab makes those visible. Jumping back to the main page, you can see if we want to send our effect to our bus from this page, we select the bus and then scroll over to our return channels. They're at the end of the faders just like they are on the desktop software. So if I start raising it here with my bus selected, we're actually sending the effect to the bus. And on the desktop software, I'm going to select the bus so we can see that happening. Now, if you find you have an effect in your monitor send and you don't want it there and you've only got your iPad available, the easy way to find out if you're sending an effect to your monitor bus is to slide your faders over so you can see the effect returns and then choose the bus that corresponds to your mix. For me, it's bus 1. If these faders were up, I would know that I was sending signal from my returns into my monitor send. So pulling these down will remove that. And of course, if you've got the faders down but you're still hearing it, then choose the effect, go to the sends page, and make sure that you're not sending this effect to any of your bus sends as pre-fader. If you are, select it to post and that will get rid of it. Now let's have a look on sending signal to your effect unit and then sending your effect unit to your monitor mix on Android. The layout is different, but we do have the same options that we've already discussed in this video. If you're an Android user and you've jumped ahead to this in the chapters, if anything from this point on doesn't make sense, please go back and watch the beginning of the video so you have a better understanding of what's taking place. So if I want to send signal to my effect unit on my Android device, what I'm going to do is select the button that shows bus 1 and the arrow pointing down. This allows me to change the location that I'm sending to. In this case, we're going to choose effect send 1. And now if I click on the sends on fader button, it turns our main mix faders into sends. So if I start raising my microphone 1, we are now sending signal to the effect unit. And you'll see this reflected in the desktop software. Now, if I want to send the returning effect to my bus, I have to change some things on the layout here. First of all, I want to change the effect send 1 back to bus 1. Once I've selected that, I'm going to choose the aux effect button. Now you'll see USB return 1, 2, 3, and 4. Return 1, 2, 3, and 4 is the same thing we see on iOS and the same thing we see on desktop. It's our effect return channels. They've just labeled them differently in Android. So now if I start raising one of these return channels, it's sending that signal to my monitor mix. The other way you can send signal from your channels to your effects is by choosing the channels themselves. So in this case, microphone 1, and then choosing the sends tab. Of course, here you can see I've got my sends to my buses and my sends to my effects. So if I start raising effect sends here, I'm actually sending signal from my microphone to my effect unit. Pressing the SE button here will open up your pre and post selection beneath each send. You'll notice a button now next to SE, and it's a picture of a globe with a line through it. When that picture has the line through it, that means you're making a change to only the channel you want. If you click on it and remove the line, then you are now making a pre-post change to all channels. And the final Android instruction is how to find an effect going to your monitor that shouldn't be there. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the button showing your bus in the arrow is set to the bus that corresponds to your mix. So of course, again, for me, that's bus 1. And then I'm going to hit the aux effect button. With send still on fader, I can see if any of my return channels are sending to my bus. If they're up and they shouldn't be, pull them down. That should get rid of the send going to your monitor. If it doesn't, here's the next thing to look at. Click on the effect return itself, and then under the sends, press the SE button and see if any of your sends to your buses are set to pre-fade. If they are set to pre-fade, set them to post. And that should get rid of your signal. So by now you should have a pretty good idea of how to get your effects into your monitor sends. And if it's in your monitor sends and you don't want it to be, or it's there by accident, you now have a pretty good idea of how to go about finding it and removing it. I hope this video was interesting or educational or entertaining. And if it was any of those three things, please be sure to like and share and subscribe. And of course, leave us some comments down below. In the comments section, also let us know if you're having any particular issues that we haven't addressed. And if we can make a video specific to your issues, we'll certainly try to do that. Also, if you want to help out the channel, we now have the ability for you to buy a super thanks. Should be in a button just down below, right near the like button. Or you can check us out on Patreon and help us out that way. With all that said, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here on Quick and Easy Quickies. Bye.